All right, here we are. We're live here at 601. Loud and Chorale folk that are with us, I'm so happy you are here to the first ever installment of Conversations with the Chorale. This is a series of interviews I hope to do during the summer, during this social distance time, with people that really inspire me and choral musicians who I look out in the world and are doing the real thing. We talk about it here at the Chorale a lot. We are a bunch of choral nerds and we love choir. And we are interested in anything that's going on choral-wise. And I'm very lucky today to have one of my favorite people who I've not spoken to in a long time because our lives have made us busy. But I'm so happy today to have Chaequan Anderson here with us. I'm just going to read you his bio, and then we're just going to hop into a conversation. Chorale folks, if you want to leave, I'm sort of monitoring our YouTube video while we have this conversation. So if you want to leave questions for Chaequan, things you want us to talk about, please put those in the comment section and I'll sort of field those as we go. But Chaequan is the founder and artistic director of the Glassbrook Vocal Ensemble. He's an active choral conductor and music educator based in Princeton, New Jersey. Chaequan has varied choral experience directing school, community youth and children, and professional choirs. And in addition to his work with Glassbrook, Chaequan is director of middle school choirs at Montclair Kimberley Academy, intermediate choir director at Trenton Children's Chorus, Cantus Choir Director at Westminster Conservatory, and associate director and conductor of Cantores with Princeton Girlchoir. Sounds like me. He's got all these jobs. We love it. He has performed with several choral ensembles in the area, including the Philadelphia Orchestra Symphonic Choir, Princeton Pro Musica, and VOICES Chorale of Hopewell. Additionally, he was a member of the highly acclaimed Westminster Choir of Westminster Choir College. He holds a Bachelor of Arts in Music and Kodai certification from Westminster Choir College and professional memberships with American Choral Directors Association, National Association for Music Educators, and Organization of American Kodai Educators. And most importantly, I was in a tenor section with him once.
Right.
And Chaequan, it's so great to have you.
It's so great to be here, Max. It's so good to see you again.
I know.
It's been a long. It feels like it's been a long time from our days standing next to each other in Westminster.
I know. And luckily, next to like Keith Latham, our section leader,
yes.
First time. We'll have to get Keith on here too. So I just want to start it out broad. So this is sort of a deep question, and you could take it any way you want. But what moment or moments made you fall in love with choir?
That's a really great question. I think probably going back to my childhood, I grew up like most people in the church. And so my first experience with music was in the church, right? And specifically, the Baptist church and music of the African-American tradition, and just all of the like amazing melodies and harmonies and rhythm that goes into that music, and just sort of being inspired by that. My aunt we have a family-owned church, and my great-grandmother was the pastor of the church, and uncles and aunts were pastors of the church, and one of my aunts was a pianist and organist, and I would sit next to her during church services and just watch her play, and my little 6-year-old brain is like just exploded. Like, this is the most like amazing thing I've ever seen and heard in my life. And I think that transferred when I got to school. I can very specifically remember sitting in elementary first grade music class and sitting there, and I think we were singing "Little Bunny Foo Foo Hopping Through the Forest," yeah. And my music teacher at the time sat down at the piano, and she began to accompany us as we were singing. And I just remember smiling and not being able to smile. And my brain was just so stimulated by what was happening that I just had to be like, this is amazing. And I think since then, it just sort of clicked for me. And, the music teachers in my life through elementary school and middle school and high school really took me under their wing, and would sometimes give me the reins. They'd say, I'm going to be out, but there will be a sub, but you're going to lead rehearsal today. And sort of just being so fortunate and blessed that, an educator would sort of let you wade in the pool a little bit, to sort of find your passion in that. And so I think that's where I really fell in love with choir and fell in love with singing, was because I had so many amazing and inspirational choral directors and music teachers as a child. So that's where it all sort of started for me. And then somehow, never in my wildest dream that I imagined that I would end up in Princeton, New Jersey, at Westminster Choir College of all places, which, again, then, sort of solidified more that foundation of loving the art of choral singing and communal music making. And so that's sort of where, sort of my journey that sort of led me here.
Yeah, it's so interesting for so many people that sort of church music aspect is sort of such a beginning point for so many of us. And I think it's because you spend so many hours doing it.
Right. It's just
Like,
ingrained.
it's your
Right.
life, you know?
Yeah.
It's your life to constantly be singing and to do it regularly and with people of many different ages. And so that's sort of locks you in for life. Did you did you take piano lessons? Did you take voice lessons? Was it all choir? Sort of what other music things other than choir did you do that you think sort of brought you to where you are?
Yeah, I think I have to go back and bring my aunt back into this, because she would play piano in church and, she would play by ear amazingly. And I had to do it. And so she would let me play. And she had a piano at her house. And when I would visit her, I would just sit down at the piano and I would sing, songs that I would learn in school and I would try to figure it out on the keyboard, right? So I've never had a piano lesson before. And so it's all just been self-taught. And actually, when I was in middle school, we sang some Christmas duty that was like Santa come down, da, 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 and it's like that 1950s rock, like 1, 6, 4, 5 chords, And so I happened to figure it out. I think the song was written in D major, and I learned it in C major because it was just the same thing over and over again. And I just happened to play it in front of my teacher, and she said, "Well, if you learn it in the right key, I'll let you play at the concert." And I was like, well, then I have to learn how to do that. And so I would take home the chorus music, and be like, okay, F, A, C, E, okay, piano, keyboard. And I just sort of started putting it together. And then I played trombone in middle school, which is always a joy. And I still actually play sometimes in the 4th grade band at school, which is always fun, sitting next to little tiny 4th graders trying to hold a huge trombone.
No, I also was a trombone player. I think
Nice, awesome.
they shoved the kids with good ears on it. They like, you can't press down buttons. You got to work this slide.
Yeah, right.
We'll talk about this a little later too, but sort of what qualities of those early teachers, you're a middle school teacher, you're a music educator. What qualities of those early teachers do you think that you try to emulate when you go into a classroom today?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my teachers were warm, they were welcoming, but I felt that they were experts, and I felt that they were the best musician that I've ever met. Both my chorus, elementary school general music, band teachers, I always felt like, wow, this person like really knows what they're doing, and so I think, and I'm sure you do this as well, we spend so much time in our planning periods, like, okay, how can I make sure that I'm being as clear as possible to these kids? And even with adults as well, how can I make sure that I'm saying what I mean to say and that it's clear and that it's authentic? And that's the other thing, is the authenticity. I always felt that the teacher wanted me to see them and they wanted to see me for who I was, as a musician in their classroom. And I think that is probably the one thing I really, really, really try to do, is when my kids come in, I really do try to take the time to talk to them like people. I do try to make connections with them that are meaningful. Even if it's something that I don't know about, I would say, please tell me about it. I don't know about that. To sort of give them a moment to sort of feel like, they can talk about themselves, sort of in a way that, they're being seen and heard. Because we all want that, even as adults, right? We all want to feel like, our voice matters, and that, our participation in the room and our presence in the room is a part of what's happening, is a part of that energy that's sort of driving the motor, in the music making, and sort of that communal togetherness that sort of brings us, as one in the choir room, in the music room.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's what's so interesting about sort of, and again, not to put down any other musical discipline, but I think it's because our voice is such a personal instrument, right? it is this thing that's in us. And so
Yeah.
our singers come to us and they're doing something super vulnerable by singing, right? And so we have to sort of return that vulnerability back to them.
Yeah.
And I
100%.
always say what's interesting about working with adults and kids at the same time in your life is you see the similarities.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because that vulnerability never goes away, that enthusiasm never goes away.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like there's something about kids that really um, forces you to be the best musician you can be. Yeah. And so I always feel that when I'm in the classroom, I'm like, I have to remember to take this with me when I go into the professional choir rehearsal, right? I have to remember to take this energy and this conviction with me into the professional choir rehearsal because, yes, these people are older, but they need to be inspired as well. They need to understand the importance of the craft and the art that we're doing here, as much as our kids do, as you know what I'm saying?
I absolutely know what you're saying. And because they want to be taken seriously.
Yes.
And I always say, whether it's the Brahms Requiem or a middle school 2-part piece, I take them both super seriously as I prepare them.
Yeah.
Because the kids know, like anyone knows, if you're phony and you're faking it, people know right away. If you're not prepared, they know.
Right. Yeah.
And it's taking everything equally serious.
Yeah.
And I think that really matters. So I kind of, thank you for sharing so much about sort of your sort of growing up with music. So many people in the chorale, myself, we have that same story of a few adults, a few parents or family members who sort of ingrain that music in us, and then we sort of go into the world. So the next is a little more nuts and bolts. And so I will say one thing that inspired me about sort of you in the past sort of several years, and I wrote you early on with it, is you began your own professional choir, as it were, of really amazing singers and amazing programming. And you started it from the ground up. And it's something that I've never done because it scares the crap out of me. I truly, the guts it takes to do that. And that is the Glassbrook Vocal Ensemble, of which we'll link in the description of this later. I might throw up some links sort of while you talk about it too, so people can, I shared some with the crowd earlier, some of your recordings. They just sound so good. And your programming is so wonderful. And you've created this sort of this audience around it, this energy. And so however you want to start, I would love to just hear, how did you start this ensemble? Why did you start this ensemble? And sort of, has it sort of done what you expected it to do?
Yeah, I think in terms of expecting it to do what I thought, it's far beyond what I ever thought. We started the group. I was teaching, it was my first year teaching, and I was teaching at a boarding school in Trenton, New Jersey. And I was doing a lot of sort of boarding parent duties. And so I was teaching during the day, but I was only teaching one section of music, 4th grade music. And I missed singing. I missed choir, after spending 4 years your whole life singing in choir. You made it to a point, you're out of college and you're teaching, and you aren't doing the thing that you've been waiting your whole life to do, which is to be in a choir or to be leading a choir and making communal music with people. And so it's so funny because I remember the day sitting in my dorm with my roommate, Lucas DeJesus. And I was like, Lucas, one day, call me crazy, but one day we're gonna have a choir. We're gonna have one, and it's gonna be here. I don't know how we're gonna do it. I don't know if it's gonna work, but we're gonna try. And I think that sort of was the spark. We were on the phone, and you remember Lauren Kelly. I was talking to Lauren Kelly about this as well. And they were really inspiring me, like, you gotta do it. Just make it happen. And so, everyone's like, everyone's teaching, and everyone misses singing. Everyone misses making music together. So how can we make that a reality for people? And so I just started calling people. I'm like, hey, we're gonna start a choir. What do you think about joining us? It's gonna be crazy. It may not work. People may not show up to our concert, but hey, if no one shows up, we're still making music, And so we're like, okay, we had some connections through the VOICES Chorale in Hopewell, where my fiance was the assistant conductor at the time, and there was this whole renovation of the 1867 sanctuary in Ewing, and it's a historical building, and they were going to knock it down. But Preservation New Jersey fought tooth and nail to say, no, 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 please don't knock this building down. This church was built in 1867. It has so much historical context and is so important to our area, so they fought tooth and nail, and they made it a historic landmark, and they started renovating it. And they were trying to turn it into a haven for the arts. So they were having different people come in. I mean, all kinds of different types of arts, music, visual art, jazz artists, classical artists, instrumentalists, vocalists. And so we were like, I think this might be our moment. So let's call up these people and ask them if we could rehearse and perform in their space. And so they were so gracious to give us a space for free, our first concert and rehearsal cycle. And probably there were about 50 people at our first concert. And we were like, yes, this is amazing. We've got 50 people in the seats, and they're all our family, but hey, like we've got people to sing with, and so just as the years went on, we just sort of tried, bringing more people into the fold, and people with expertise in marketing, and people with expertise with fundraising, and things of that sort. And we started collaborating with area groups like Princeton Girlchoir and Westminster Conservatory. We performed with their orchestra, and we did some new works by some of the composers on faculty there. And our audiences just started growing. Our donor base just started growing. And it's like every concert, there's a couple more people, there's a little bit more money in the box, and we're like holy moly, like this is real, this is happening. And so I often reflect on it, mostly after the concert, and just say, wow, like look here now. And 4 years ago, we could have never thought that we would have made it this far. And we've just been so incredibly blessed and grateful. I mean, there are no words. And I'm just happy that it's working, and that people here to come to hear our music making and want to be a part of that. And I think, one of the most important things we try to do is sort of to make it a space where people can feel comfortable to make music. I sort of know that there's sort of like I don't know, how do I say this? There's sort of there's sort of an energy that comes with being a professional, right? Mm-hmm. That we want to perform at such a level of perfection that we remove our level of like there's a desire there to make music, or there's the desire to be connected to the text, or connected, to the artistry, connected to the rubato and all that sort of stuff, right? We sort of let go of that because we're sort of so focused on being our best. We don't want to make a mistake, because that might take away from our professional status, but we've got a room of professional singers that, we say, it's okay. We're here to make music together, and we're not robots, we're people. And we're going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes, and that's okay. That's just all a part of the experience. Imperfection is the spice of life, in my opinion.
Thank you. Imperfection is the spice of life. People, that's a quote. We're taking that.
And progress is a ladder. It's one step at a time. And sometimes you have to go up, and sometimes you have to go down. But as long as you keep going, you'll make it.
Well, when I see like videos and images and social media and stuff, would you guys kill that game as well? I mean, I feel like, again, one reason I'm seeing it down here in the DC region is because you guys are really out there in a sort of really authentic way. And what's beautiful is you look at your singers, they're always smiling. Yeah. Like I look at these stills, these videos, and that's what struck me. I'm like, these people are loving what they're doing, and in so much sort of, as you said, professional music making, that joy can go away because it's another gig, or it's another thing I have to do, or it becomes something you have to do, not something you want to do. Right, exactly. And the fact that you've created this environment where people want to do it is super rare and magical. And I feel that that's infectious, even, 300 miles away. Like I feel that energy. Know that, we're having that effect because I think that is the goal, that we can have fun making high quality music making. Like it can be joyous and it can be fun, and we can laugh while singing Bach, and we can cry while singing Hagen, and we can be brought together in those collective experiences, right? Because our
we've all had our own journey to
Yeah.
to the drinking well, right? But
Yes,
we're
absolutely.
there together, and each one of our experiences is so crucial, and bringing music to life. Especially when we do music out of the African American tradition,
Mhm.
I say, some of us may not have grown up singing this, and some of us may not know, the experiences that go into writing this music, but I can guarantee you that there is something in your life that you could bring to this piece, right? There's something in your life or in someone else's life that that you can bring to this piece and provide healing for someone musically. Yeah.
I sort of thank you for bringing that up, because one thing I've sort of noticed is you seem to do this sort of regular celebration of African American composers, and specifically African American composers, and how how diverse and how much depth there is there.
Yeah.
Because there's this conversation in the choral world right now about sort of first off, a lot of the inequalities that exist in the choral world right now,
Sure.
and in our world in general,
Sure.
and a lot of the doors that are shut to people of color, and to Black people specifically. And I think what I found so inspiring about your programming, which I think we all need to take a hint on, is that you celebrate spirituals and gospel music,
Right.
but you also realize that Black composers contain multitudes, like we all do.
Right.
And specifically, I was watching some of your, and we'll link to this as well, but the Carlos Simon piece Sanctus, we talked a little bit before, and you did a little interview with him where he talked about sort of taking a break from gospel to
Yeah.
write this, set this traditional Latin text in this beautiful piece. But at the same time, he said, well, I can't always remove gospel music from me, that
Right.
there's
It's a
flicks
part,
in there.
it's a part of you. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you could talk about, you don't have to talk about that piece, but sort of how you program music by African American composers,
Sure.
and sort of what insight you have there.
Yeah. There are, of course, the many African American composers that we know of, right? Like Moses Hogan, of course, and Rollo Dilworth, and Adolphus Hellstork, and Rosephine Powell, who's a Westminster grad, and Brandon Waddles, who's a Westminster grad, and Marcus Garrett, Carlos Simon, Christopher Harris. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, right? Undine Smith Moore, and all of these people who are writing gospel music are also writing non-idiomatic um, music by of the African American tradition, right? So, yes, Undine Smith Moore has spirituals and gospel music, but she also has, you know, choral, other choral music that's not of that tradition, right? And it's really important for us to lift up those compositions, because I feel, especially in classical choral realms, we get our high powered spiritual and we stick it towards the end as our crowd riser pleaser, and then that's good enough. But there's so much more depth there. And it's really important to and it takes a lot of digging, because when you search music by African American composers, those pieces aren't going to be the pieces that come up first, because those aren't the pieces that people are looking for and going to pay a lot of money for off the bat. Yeah. And so it's really important. And Marcus Garrett put out this great resource called Beyond Elijah Rock, the non-idiomatic music of African American composers. And he's got a whole spreadsheet there of all of these composers that we're talking about and all of the non-idiomatic music that they have written. And it's really important that we show sort of the depth of these composers. Yeah. I mean, I even think about, Beethoven, for instance, right? Early Beethoven and late Beethoven is like, there's a whole realm there, right? And like you're not gonna base your opinion on Beethoven's whole life off of late or early. There's the whole spectrum. Yeah. And so the same thing with these composers who are African American. I like to think about them as composers who happen to be African American. Yeah. Like I wouldn't consider I'm a conductor and a musician who happens to be African American, and there is an identity there that I'm very proud of, and that I want people we want to be seen for us, and all of our depth and all our realness, and all of our heritage and all of our experiences, in the classical music world and outside of it. And you sort of mentioned this as well, that, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking right now, but sort of like here we go, sort of the experience of our Western culture and the things that we deem to be acceptable in our music making and our programming. Yeah. And so while a lot of our music is based on these classical traditions, we sort of shut the door to anything besides that, right? And there's a world, on the other side that we just have to open the door and let it in. It's not going to erase all the wonderful and beautiful music that's written in the Western culture. But it's going to enhance that because, there's so much out there that can really, sort of like just boost us, all of our music making at every level. I think that's really important.
Well, and I think again, another thing about choral music that I think we need to take more advantage of and continue to is like every society we know has sang.
Yeah.
Every society we know has used their voice to celebrate life, to mourn, to do these human experiences. And they all write choral music. And I think what's amazing is seeing what is the same, right? Yeah. Is finding what is that string? In what ways is the Brahms Requiem were you there when they crucified my Lord? In what way are those worlds connected? Yeah. And you can't do one without thinking about the other, because we're all, they are interconnected that way. And I think is choral people who are attracted to choral music want a smorgasbord of music, exactly. Right? They want, people show up to a choir because they want to do a diverse amount of music. And I think it's our job to sort of do that authentically.
Yes.
And I find that to be sort of the most sort of important thing. And it's definitely something that I've grown up with, right? Because I think, as someone who sort of grew up in a very white environment in sort of Ohio, where I grew up, I loved when we would sing a spiritual, right? Yeah. Like but that was my only access point, right, to African-American choral music. And as sort of I've had to educate myself about all that's out there. Mm-hmm. And again, my programming is still not perfect, right? No one's is.
Yeah, mine either.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, and programming is this weird thing because it's super personal, right? I mean, Joe Miller always used to say, if I can't get behind a piece, how can I teach it?
Yeah.
But I think the sort of other part of that is, how can I get myself to like something?
Exactly.
Right. Right.
How can I put myself in a place where I maybe am uncomfortable and am not the expert on this, right? And how can I connect with people who are and bring those diverse experiences to my choir to make us all better musicians, conductor, singer, everybody together. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And because in conductors, we're dreamers, right? There's a certain amount of ego we all have to have. You were talking, before we got on, sort of about, it takes a little naivete to even when you're young to jump into these things. I certainly was big and stupid when I did things for the first time. And I think that what we all have these dream pieces we want to do. Yeah. And sort of we put blinders on, I think, as conductors.
Yeah.
And we need to sort of, I'm always trying to think about new pieces and new ways to sort of position these things so that it's not always about me, but it's what is the choir going to sing well? What is my audience going to do?
Yes. And there have been so many times where I want to program a piece, right? Particularly with professionals, where you want to program a piece and they say, oh, well, I've sang that piece, blah, 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 many times. And every choir has sung that piece, but it's like, has every audience member heard the piece, right? And how is it going to affect the person who's hearing it for the first time, right? And sort of approaching programming, it's like, how can I bring the audience sort of into the fold and sort of in points where like, oh, I know that piece. Oh, I'm so glad to hear it again. And oh, I've never heard that one before. That's really interesting. you know, like, oh, I love that there's a piece that I've never heard. Oh, and that's a great comfort piece that, you know, my grandfather sang to me when I was a child, right? Or I sang when I was in high school or middle school, right? Even though our, you know, our choir members may feel that it's, you know, they are at a certain level and the piece may be here or here, you know, how it's always important. I try to remind my singers to think about the person who's sitting and watching you and listening. How, what are they going to take away from this, right? And how can you make this as authentic for them as possible? You know, because that one piece that you may be tired of singing or tired of hearing may be the one piece that's going to bring them back, or light a light bulb for them and go, oh, yes, this is it, you know?
Absolutely. And I think I always tell kids when I'm teaching them, and even the choir, you know, there's that moment where if you know the minute a piece starts to feel a bit boring,
Mm-hmm.
when you're rehearsing, is actually that moment where it's probably ready to show people.
Yeah.
Because that means, you know, and I don't know about you, but I'll be halfway through rehearsing one program
mm-hmm.
and I'll already be thinking about the next one.
Yep.
Right. You know, and I have to actually force myself to sort of be present in what I'm working on now, because again, that means you're ready to present it to people.
Yeah.
And it means that audience. And it's interesting with an audience because especially those of us, you know, who are not sort of in college sort of job environments,
Mm-hmm.
you know, when we're in small nonprofits who require ticket money and require donations, you know, there can be and dues and you know, my case where, you know, we want to balance music that's going to challenge people versus music, and in challenge in many ways, versus music that they're going to love, right? So when I'm programming, as you were sort of talking, it's always that balance, right?
Right.
Of sort of what are they going, how are we going to forge that balance as we go sort of forward? One thing you said earlier, which I sort of, and I've noticed about your programs, you do collaborate a lot.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like you were always collaborating. Believe, you know, in your sort of program, I forget who you collaborated with, but your sort of In Sleep, A Journey of Life and Death program, where you did Passing of the Year.
Yes.
With Dove, an amazing piece. That was a big collaboration, but you've done, so can you tell you why you seem to have this drive to collaborate with different groups? Sort of where does that come from? And how did that sort of work out for your ensemble?
Sure. You know, for me, music making has to be collaborative. We have to be in this together. You know, I think for especially in a place where we are saturated with choirs, we're saturated with choral ensembles, it's really important for us to bridge our audiences together. Yeah. And for us to bridge our connections as people, because we're all making music. So why not make music together? Yeah. Why not make music communal? Why not show our community that just because this choir is made up of these kind of people in this area and this, you know, age range in this area, and this choir performs this type of music and that we're still all making music, and we can find middle ground and make music together. And then we are lifting each other up. We're lifting the choral art up. We are lifting up the importance of communal music making. You know, I just think it's so crucial. And, you know, every year our biggest concert is our winter concert that we collaborate with Dr. Linnell Jenkins and Princeton Girlchoir. And there is just something about, you know, and this is why we teach children. There is just something about the treble sound that is so unique. And I mean, look, I can go to a middle school choir concert and cry my eyes out.
Yes.
There is something about the honesty and authenticity of a child, and it is so tangible when they sing. Yeah, there's just something about it that just really tugs on my musical heartstrings, and, you know, my just the want to make music with kids.
But so Chaequan, and I'm saying this jokingly, but where's your ego?
Yeah.
I mean, you're a conductor, man. You're a co-conductor. Where's your ego? Where is your, you know, because again, I think what stops people from collaborating, and if I'm honest, early on, this was me.
Yeah.
It's like, this is my choir. This is the way
Right.
this will be. And we won't let in these things. We won't take those risks. And as I've gotten older, thankfully, and I'm just slightly older than you, but like, my gosh, thank you for getting there before me. Because again, I think, is there a reason you think you don't have that ego? I mean, that draw, because we know what do you owe that to? That you're willing to let go of some of that power to collaborate?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's because I got the majority of my desire to make music with people in a classroom. And that, my teachers made it very obvious to us that we had to work together or it wasn't going to work. You know, we, and I, and I think going to, especially at collegiate level and being in college, and you are always trying to prove yourself. Yeah, you're always trying to prove that you have what it takes to make it, and that people should take you seriously. And that just because you made a mistake in class, or you made a mistake in a recital, or you made a mistake in a concert, that doesn't determine your pathway to musicianship. Yeah. And that even in those places, especially in those places, we have to lift each other up. Someone said to me, choral music is not sustainable. And I said, it's surprising you say that to me, because I feel that you feel that because because of the age of the things what's happening in our lifetime, right? Social media, right? It's all about presentation, it's all about marketing oneself, it's all about putting yourself out there to be recognized, and in some way we sort of lose that important communal aspect. We sort of lose that, like, this isn't about me as the conductor of your ensemble. I'm one person in this entire room that is just sort of like, I'm just facilitating the music making, but you're all a part of it. Every single one of you in the corral out there who's watching us, right? Like, your conductor thinks you're important, and he can't make music without you. Yeah. And I mean, like, if I didn't have a choir, I couldn't make choral music. It's all a communal experience. It's all so important for us to all be in it together. um, and groups that are likewise like, oh well, they do this and they do that, like, that's wonderful, and they should continue to do that, but we can also do it together. you
Yeah.
know yeah.
Dr. Miller always used to say that your job as a conductor is to work yourself out of a job.
Yeah.
That, like, in the best possible world is when you have inspired and
Yeah.
trained and taught your singers well enough that you're just along for the ride, that the
Right.
conducting is no longer even about
Right.
you dictating. It's
Right.
about you. We and because of our schedules and because of the time, we rarely get there, but those moments where you do are super powerful. I mean, Chaequan, I just have chills talking to you. I mean, it's so inspiring. It's just the positivity. And it's interesting because I've also heard, I feel, we're also in this very scary time for choral music
Hmm.
in our world, right? I mean,
Sure.
where we worry about simply the nature of what we do. And frankly, we've gotten like the most press we've ever gotten as a field,
The
but it's not
profession.
like good press, right? It's like been the worst, and I think what saves us is what you're talking about.
Mhm.
Is the fact that those authentic connections that we can build. You said something a bit ago. I'd love to talk about a bit of a nerd out moment.
Mhm.
So you were talking about sort of your love for that treble sound, that
Yeah.
children sound, and also you work with adults and
Mhm.
kids. And so when you're standing in front of a group of people and humans, sort of how do you think about building that sound of that ensemble that's in front of you? What is the same when you're working with professionals and kids, and sort of what is different?
Yeah. Um, I always think about keeping things connected to the breath as a singer. My primary in college was voice. And, I just remember every single one of my lessons for years, 4 years, was about staying connected to the breath, right? And creating your authentic sound. Yeah. And I can remember singing choir in college, in Westminster Choir, for the first day. And I was like, oh, well, if I sing too loud, then, my voice is going to, pop out of the section, and it's going to ruin the sound, right? And it was affecting the sound, because I wasn't producing my true sound connected to my breath in full resonance into my section and into the choir. Yeah. And so I think with both kids and adults, it's stay connected to the breath and sing your true voice. Yeah. And then we can modify the vowels, and we can work on the rubato and the text stress and all that stuff together, and the sound will be as delicious as you possibly could imagine. But like, you have to be okay with staying connected to your breath and singing your true resonant sound, both for adults and for kids. And even as a singer who sings in choirs, I still need to be reminded of that as a conductor, even though I say that to people all the time. Okay, take a deep breath, stay connected. Listening is important. That's what we do. You have to listen. You can't forget that. And what is the same when I work with adults and kids is I try to help them really think about being connected to the text, being connected to making artistic decisions. Yeah, it's like, if you think there's a crescendo there, like, look at me. We're gonna, like, we'll try it. Like, we're communicating. It's a sort of like artistry, always thinking about how you can be your best artist and your best musician, but always staying connected to the breath, always singing your true resonant, healthy singing, listening, and then everything else, we can modify vowels. We can decide on crescendos and decrescendos. We can decide on articulation and text stress, but the fundamentals.
Yeah, and singing is this horrible cycle sometimes, because so many of and I'm going to ask you in a second about sort of what advice you give to beginners. And I always say what's tricky is, in order for that breath to get going, you have to feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And when we get nervous, our breath shuts down, everything in our body shuts down, and so we breathe less well, and
Right.
so we sound worse, and then we hear ourselves and we get angry, and so it's like this sort of horrible cycle. So in the chorale, we're a non-audition ensemble, and we have people who are professional singers and musicians, and we have folks who are sort of beginners, in people who haven't sang really ever. We've had those. What advice do you give a singer in any age, any sort of background, about if they're just starting out, when they go to that first choral rehearsal, what should they be thinking about? What should they be worried about?
Yeah. I know that singing is so personal, because it like our voice is us, right? Like when you hear my voice, you are hearing me. And when I hear your voice, I am hearing you. And for some people, they've never reached the point where they feel comfortable with that, right? And I think one of the ways to begin to feel comfortable with that, especially in a choral setting, because you feel like everyone can hear you. I'm singing and everyone can hear me. But so it's just the comfortability to know, like I said, when I was singing in Westminster Choir for the first time, it's like knowing that like your voice belongs and your voice is going to fit in. Yeah. And if there is something that is not quite clicking, trust your conductor to be on your side and have your back. Yeah. And if they want to address that know that it's because in their ear, from the outside of the choir, they're trying to make sure that it's all blended together. Yeah. I think as conductors, we often paint with a wide brush. Because we are addressing the mass, and it's very rare that we address the individual. But I think that we all have to become more comfortable with doing that. Yeah, because it's for the greater good. But for the beginner, your voice is you, and you don't have to be ashamed of that. Feel comfortable to sing. I always tell my kids, especially with kids, you're trying to teach them to sing sort of in their singing voice, right? What we call the singing voice, in their head voice, and sort of playing with the different ranges of your voice, and so I would encourage you to sort of play around with that, walk around your house doing some sirens, walk around your house singing, in your high voice and your low voice and your middle voice, and just sort of like figuring that out so that you feel more comfortable with the flexibility of your instrument. Does that make sense?
Perfect sense. I mean, perfect. And it's becoming comfortable with this thing that God or nature, whatever you want to call it,
Right.
gave you, right? I mean, we as humans were meant to make noise. Like,
That's
we're
right.
a weird animal, and not just make noise, but make very specific, articulated, interesting and complicated sounds. And so this is something we're all meant to do, right?
Yeah.
And so I agree with you completely. It's just sort of discovering what you sound like and enjoying that. All right. So I think an idea for sort of 3 questions I want to pose to you in a row. I was told once early on, I can't remember by who, that as a conductor, we must live in the past, the present, and the future all at the same time, right? We're thinking about what just happened. We got to think of what's coming next, but then we also have to be completely present. So
Yeah.
I'm just curious, what is one thing musically from your past that you're sort of most proud of, that you look back and it's sort of your mountaintop moment thus far?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And it's a hard question, I think, because, we have been so fortunate to have so many amazing musical experiences, in our early, we're not, in our young lives to this point. And it's so hard to think, of just one, because, and I know you feel this way too. We're always grateful for that opportunity, when we're standing with our choir, in the rehearsal and things are going exactly right. Or we are standing at the concert and the people are on their feet clapping, or you finish a piece and you hear tears behind you. There are just so many of those moments, and I think it's hard to pick just one. But if I had to pick one, like off the top of my head, I think it would be singing Mahler in college, singing Mahler's Second Symphony with the Philadelphia Orchestra. And, the final cadence comes and the full organ is going and the horns are blaring and my knees are like this.
You're just screaming,
like
you're just sobbing and singing.
Yeah. And if I had to think of another one, I think it's standing on the stage with my kids, at the end of any concert and feeling that they are proud of the work that they've done. I don't think that there is anything that can sort of replicate the joy of those kids when they've made it to the end. And so that's always a moment, like, show my kids sort of the spectrum of the process. We started at the beginning with a piece of paper in our hand, and now we're making music, and everything in between. And I sort of feel like, as an educator, and not just as a conductor, but as an educator, and being a conductor is being an educator, right? Like that's what we do.
Yeah.
Even in our professional groups and with our, adults, acknowledging the process and just not knowing what's going to happen. I mean, COVID-19 being an example of that, right? Starting one place and then having an endpoint. And then just knowing that every rehearsal leading up to that concert, everything the first rehearsal and the concert, everything in between that is so important. It is a part of the process, and none of that should be cast aside, And, I know that Max too, after our rehearsals, we're laying in our beds, and our minds are racing, and it's like, oh, rehearsal ended at 8:30 and it's 10:30. And I'm like, oh, I could have done that better. Oh, I should have helped the sopranos do that. Oh, I should have said that, and I should have done that, and I should have done that.
I'm lucky enough to have a 45-minute drive home from Loudon Choral rehearsals. Lucky because I can go through everything that happened
before you get
good, bad, and ugly, and then hopefully I get home and I get to go to sleep, right? I mean, but it's also excitement. I mean, it is that joy, and I love that your two experiences is both this Mahler 2 epic. I mean, I was there for that. I sang in that performance too. Like, you're at the top of the world. But that top of the world also exists when you change the life of a kid through a concert.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And that's what's great about music, is it hits us at those levels.
Totally.
So, okay, what is something in the present, and it doesn't have to be choral music, but what's a music thing you're obsessed with right now? Like, what are you listening to? What is in your musical brain right now?
You know, okay, so when I think about treble chorus, the thing that's in my brain right now is the Brenner Earth songs. In particular, The World is Full of Poetry by David Brenner.
Okay.
Two-part. It's gorgeous. Go listen to it.
I can't wait. I'm writing it down so I don't forget.
You won't regret it. And then the other thing that's on my brain, in terms of maybe collegiate or professional level work, is Joel Thompson's the last 7 words of the Unarmed.
Oh, unbelievable.
That piece is composed off of the last words of a lot of the unarmed Black men who have been killed through police brutality, and the work is just chilling. It's absolutely chilling, and it is amazingly composed, amazingly constructed, and the performance was done by the University of Michigan Men's Glee Club and Dr. Eugene Rogers, and it is just incredible. And if you have 14 minutes, go listen to it. I promise it will change your life. It is just absolutely amazing. And then also just trying to figure out, as a conductor, as an artist, as a musician, as a choral musician, as a person, what is our responsibility and our call to action at this time, and how we can use our platform to help people feel heard and to deliver a message that speaks to people, because art has always been political. And it's important for us to use our voices. We have them, right? God gave us our voices, or nature gave us our voices so that we can speak out for people who can't speak. And it's important for me, particularly as a Black man in the world and in this profession, that I use my very unique platform to make art that makes people feel heard, and that there's a message conveyed there. And so I'm sort of, in the trenches, just trying to figure out what that is going to be. And I would call all people to use their voice and their platform, to lift others up in a time where it's needed. And there's so many different places and opportunity for that.
Yeah, it is so sort of it's wonderful to hear you speak on that in that such powerful way. It's a reminder for all of us that do art of that. And I think we forget, because art is all of the things. It's joyous, but it can also create change. And so big thoughts in this time. And so thank you for sharing that. So now, future. And future's tough right now, because here's the deal. We have this COVID-19 thing, and this is going to be with us for who knows? No one knows, right? But eventually we will be out of it. I believe that. I pray and I hope on that. So when I say future, what is something down the road, either in your career or musically, a dream piece, a dream situation? I mean, what is sort of down the road from you that years from now you're thinking about, you're excited for?
Yeah. That's a really good question. I think that if we don't get out of this thing soon, I do believe, and I'm very hopeful, that some genius person out there is going to make a lot of money. Whoever you are, if you're out there, hear me, that some genius person out there is going to make a way for us to rehearse virtually in real time. Please, if you're out there and you have the skills to make it happen, I will. I'm not rich, but I'll throw a couple dollars at you to make this happen. But in the long run, a dream piece, or I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, that's something I think that
You live in the present too well.
I,
Again, the ego, Chaequan. Let's get you the ego. No, I'm kidding. We don't want that. We don't
I
want
just,
you to be you.
I think it's just so hard. I hope that my choir continues to grow,
Mhm.
and that we can continue to make meaningful art together. I hope that we can continue to bring in funds that are necessary to do what we do. Um, I hope that we can make music together, and again, in what's really in the future for me, as I mentioned before, is being intentional, and I really mean being intentional in
Mm.
creating diverse programs. And I too have fallen short. I too have gotten to my concert or the dress rehearsal, and I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, this is running great, and I'm just checking the program, checking the composers, and I go, oh man, I really was not intentional
Yeah.
about finding composers of different backgrounds and ethnicities and
Mm.
experiences. And my goal for the future is to be very intentional about that.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I think it's an incredible goal. And I think as we sort of stare down this sort of, which I hate to say bright side, because I don't think there's any bright side to this moment in our world. But if
Yeah.
there's anything to force us to stop and to confront
Mm-hmm.
sort of our world, I
Mm-hmm.
think is in a way a blessing.
Yeah.
That, because again, as artists, as choral musicians, we that's our duty.
Yeah.
We are in the people industry. We make people
Yeah.
art.
Yeah. We had a wonderful chat via Princeton Girlchoir with composer Eric Eschenwalds
Yes.
few weeks ago, and he called this time the fermata time. What he kept saying, what are you doing in this fermata time, right?
Wow.
This is the time, and the artistic director of Princeton Girlchoir, Dr. Linnell Jenkins, she has mentioned this to our kids and us, our colleagues as well, that during this fermata time is a time for us to sharpen our skills, yeah, and to
Mhm.
work on the things that when we come out of this thing are going to make us, ready to go. And to use this time to really deepen our understanding of things musically, to deepen and sharpen our skills so that we're ready to go. And in a separate chat, we had a conversation with composer Elaine Hagenberg, and she said, just think about the day that we can get back together and sing, and how profound that is going to be, and what that is going to sound like and feel like, and just how we will never take that moment for granted ever again. I just thought that was so profound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's about 7 o'clock, and I think that's a beautiful place to leave us on. Thank you for giving us Eric Eschenwald's fermata time
Yes.
analogy, because that's what we are. And as people who love singing, and Chaequan, it is. Thank you for filling my cup today. I mean, and I think
Thank
you
you for
filled all
having
of our
me.
cup.
Thank you for
There's no surprise why people love you and why you have achieved the success you have. That positivity and that energy is amazing. And so thank you so much. You could stay on this call for a second and say goodbye to everyone, and then
Sure.
chat everybody. But to the chorale, thank you so much for tuning in on this. We're going to do a few more of these. Oh, we're going to do a few more of these this summer. I have some other friends coming in to talk. We're also got some other excited ideas in the work. And of course, we are racking our brain about what to do in the fall, but we promise to get back to you that soon. And the fact that we can stay together in this comment section, stay together in this time together and share music is super inspiring. So again, my super duper thanks to Chaequan for being with us, and thanks to you all. This will be available afterwards, so please send it to your friends so they can also get their cup filled like we all just did tonight. So thank you all so much. Have a great night.
Thank you. Bye.